Here we go, guys. It's been a long time. Well, actually, this is the first video of the year, I think, so never mind. But it's been a while since I've made a video. Here we go, though. I'm going to work through the distance and midpoint homework. There are some questions in here that might be kind of tricky for some of us. The first one's a level 2.5 question. Let's see how it goes. Remember, we're working on distance and midpoint and various versions of those questions. Find the midpoint of a line segment with the given endpoints. Here's the given endpoints. If the answer is not a whole number, type it as a decimal or fraction, so we can do it either one. So here's examples. That doesn't mean that's the answer. That's an example of what your answer should look like. So we're finding the midpoint of a line segment. A midpoint is the average of the 2 points. Remember, we talked about that, the average of 2 points. How do you get the average of 2 points? You're going to add them and divide by 2. If you were to write it out as a formula, you're going to add the x-coordinates and divide by 2. You're going to add the y-coordinates and divide by 2, and that's going to give you a midpoint. It's not a single number, it's a coordinate, it's a point. So let's take a look at what these numbers look like. These are my x values, and these are my y values. We want to add the x's, so that would be -6 and 11, divide by 2. We want to add the y's, that would be 3 and -3 divided by 2. That's what it would look like. Now remember, when we talked about this in class, 3 minus 3 is like saying 3 plus -3. Are we adding the numbers 3 and -3? Yes. Yes, we are. If you said 3 plus 3, that is not correct. It is 3 minus 3 in this case. -6 plus 11 is 5. 3 minus 3 is 0. And we divide those by 2, and that would just stay 5 halves, and that would become 0. And that is our answer. There we go. Add and divide by 2. Find a midpoint. The next one, find the midpoint of the segment with the given endpoint in points. If the answer is not a whole number, type the decimal or the fraction. Exact same question as the last one, but it's a level 2 because, well, if you see the answer there, the answer is not a fraction. Just having the answer be a fraction makes it a little harder for some people. But I'm not going to write all the formulas again, but here's the basic idea. We're going to add the x-coordinates. Again, let me write this out. We're taking these two numbers and we are adding them. We're adding the numbers 4 and -12. Well, what does that look like? That is 4 minus 12. You have to be really careful how you approach this and do this. We're adding or combining the numbers 4 and -12. And then we divide by 2. And then the y values are 10 and 6. We are adding and dividing by 2. This is -8 divided by 2. This is 16 divided by 2. And that is the coordinate -4, 8. Crushed it, loved it. Level 3 question, so that would indicate it's a little harder than what we just did. We're finding the distance between the 2 points. Round to the nearest thousandths if necessary. For example, the answer to this question is that. So that time it says this is the answer. So they gave us the answer in the question, but that doesn't stop us from trying to do it. Remember that the distance is how far apart things are. The way I showed you this in class is that it is the distance between the x's squared. It's the distance between the y's squared. Real quick reminder of what this looks like on a graph. If you're trying to find the distance between these 2 points on a graph, moving left and right on a graph are your x values. Moving up and down on a graph are your y values, and the distance is the hypotenuse. This is a Pythagorean theorem situation. So what is this going to look like? The distance equals, it's always the square root. How far apart? Here are my x's. How far apart are those numbers? -8 and -1. That is a distance of 7, always positive, squared. That's my delta x squared. Plus, how about my delta y? -7 to -2 is a distance of 5, and we square that. Now, if I didn't have a calculator, I would leave this as 35. Nope, not 35. Who said that? This is 49 plus 25, which is the square root. So that'd be 60 plus 14, be 74. But we are going to type this into our baby calculators. And the way we do that, if I go in here real quick, is we have to type in the number first, which was, 49 plus 25, 49, 69, 74. So we type in 74, and then we hit the square root button. And that is 8.602. So that is what you have to do in that case. You have to start with the number and then hit the square root button on a calculator like this. So the square root of 74 is 8.602. Got to find some way to get that answer. All right, another level 3. Should start to feel closer to a level 2 with practice, meaning it should become a lot easier the more you do it. We're finding the distance between the 2 points once again, rounding to the nearest thousandths once again. For example, if this is what you get in the calculator, make sure you round it correctly. That is not the answer to this question. Oh, that's kind of confusing. All right, so 5 and 7 are my x's, so the distance is going to be 2 squared. Where'd the 2 come from? Where'd the 2 come from? Distance is how far apart. We start with the x's. How far apart are the x's? 2, and it's Pythagorean theorem, so we square it. How far apart are the y's? My y's are -1 and 6. Those are 7 apart, and we square it. So that distance is 4 plus 49, which is the square root of 53. Now, if you don't have a calculator, you just leave it like that. But if it specifically tells you to round, you're going to type in the square root of 53 like we just did, and that gives me a decimal version of 7.280198. Now, we don't write all the numbers. We're rounding to the nearest thousandths, so we do need to write the 0 in this case. If you don't write the 0, it is wrong. If you stop here, if you just write 7.28, it feels like you rounded to the hundredths. You do need that 0 placeholder to get that right. That is the only answer Schoolage you will take to get this question right. All right, level 3 means we're getting a little tougher here. This time, what did I do? It says find the other endpoint with the given midpoint and endpoint. So there's a few strategies to do this. You can reverse engineer it algebraically, or you can understand what it means like we did in class. So what does that mean? Well, one way to do this is to take your endpoint, and that's at -2, 3, and stack it with your midpoint, -8, 1. Think about this. Let's just go one of these at a time. Let's pretend we're on a number line. I know, again, we talked about this in class already. I'm just kind of showing you. Let's say here's 0. Here's -2, and here's -8. And what we're saying is that this is one endpoint, and this is the midpoint. So where is the other end? That's the question. Well, if you have to go -6 to get to the middle, doesn't the end have to be another -6? Chilling at -14 over here. So that's the idea here, is that if you're trying to figure out how far do you have to go on the x-axis only. We're not talking about distance between 2 points. We're talking about the distance between the x's only. So if this is -6 to go from the end to the middle, you have to do another -6 to land you at -14. Then you do the same process to the y values. If you're on a number line, if you start at 3 and you go to 1, right? If this is the end and this is the middle, how far did you go? You just went backwards 2. So the other end has to be backwards 2. Going to land you at -1. So that's the strategy we discussed in class on how to do a problem like that. All right, number 6, it says it's a level 3. Having a 0 as one of the coordinates makes this easier than the last question. It's the exact same scenario. So I'm going to do it much quicker, but it's the same strategy. You have an endpoint chilling at 4, 5. You have a midpoint chilling at 0, -1. You want to know how you move from 4 to 0. You go backwards 4, so you need to go backwards another 4. So it's going to be 0 minus 4 is -4. You're at 5, you go to -1, you've gone back or you've gone down 6, so we're going to subtract another 6. So -1 minus 6 lands us at -7. So that's the other end. Can you check your work? We talked about that. What is 4 plus -4? That is 0. Divided by 2 is 0, so it checks out. What is 5 plus -7? That is -2. Divided by 2 is -1. That checks out. So, yep, you can check your work on those. All right, level 3.5. This would be a level 4 if it was 1/5 the distance instead of 1/4. Fourths are always easier because you can get by with strategies that aren't as good. There's strategies that work with fourths that don't work with other denominators, and it kind of makes you think you're better at something. So here's the way we talked about this. This is the hardest one to understand by far. We're going to have to break it down slowly and one letter at a time. So let's start with the x's only, and let's think about on a number line what is happening. We are starting, we have a coordinate at 2 and a coordinate at -6. And we're going from A to B. This is A and B. So we're traveling this direction, okay? We're just talking about the x coordinates on a number line. We're just talking about those numbers, 2 and -6. How far apart are these x coordinates? 2 to -6 is a distance of -8. So if I told you to go the entire distance, so we are starting at 2, when we subtract 8, we land at -6. That is going the entire way. That's 100% of the distance from A to B. But we don't want to go 100%. We want to go 1/4 the distance. So we're not going to subtract 8. So that's not what we're going to do. We need to figure out what 1/4 the distance is. So your first step is to take the total distance and multiply it by 1/4. That is -2. So we're not going backwards 8. We're only going backwards 1/4 of that. So we're traveling backwards -2. 1, 2. We're going backwards 2 spots. The most common wrong thing is people say this is the answer. That is not the answer. -2 is not the answer. -2 is the distance to the answer. So here's the next phase. We take our starting position 2 and we apply the distance traveled. We're doing 2 minus 2, and that's going to land us at 0. And that's the x coordinate of our 1/4 point, right? When we did 2 minus 8, we went all the way across. That landed us at -6. We don't want to go all the way across. We want to stop 1/4 of the way. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the y coordinate. I'm going to do it a lot faster. The y coordinate, it starts at 6. That's my A. And it goes to 18. That's my B. You could draw it vertically if you want, but we're just talking about how far are they. 100% of the distance is plus 12. So 6 plus 12 is 18. But I don't care about plus 12. I don't want to do plus 12. I want to do 1/4 of that. So the plus 12 is the interesting part. I need to take the 12 and figure out what is 1/4 of 12. And that's going to be 3. 3 is not the answer. 3 is the distance to the answer. Remember what, let me label these real quick. My y values are 6 and 18. We are starting at 6, and we need to move 1/4 of that distance, and we would land at 9. So 9 would be 1/4 of the way. So the final answer, the x-coordinate is 0 and the y-coordinate is 9. That is a hard question, hard to conceptualize, hard to execute. Whew! We're going to do one more, and it's even harder. This is a true level 4 version of what we just did. Fractions are in the answer. It's not a quarter. It's not a fourth. It's not an eighth. It's not a multiple of 2. It is 2/7 the distance from C to E. So here we go. I'm going to do this quicker, but it is the same strategy. Your first step is to focus on your x's and figure out how far that is. From -6 to 1, you are doing a +7. So the first number I care about is +7. And I don't want to go the whole way. I want to go 2/7 of the way. So -6 to 1 is +7. I want to go 2/7 of that. Well, that's 2, right? The 7s cancel out. 2 is not the answer. I'm starting at -6. And instead of doing +7, right, if I did -6 + 7, I would get 1, which is where the other end point is. I don't want to land there. I'm going to do -6 + 2, which is going to land me at -4. That is my x-coordinate. This is all for my x-coordinate. And then for my y-coordinate, it's going to be a lot harder. This is a fraction. How do I go from 5 to -3? That is -8. -8 is 100% of the distance. I don't want to go 100%. I want to go 2/7. So that is -16/7, right? That's like -8/1. We multiply the tops, we multiply the bottoms. So that's how far we're going. But where are we starting? We're starting at 5. So it starts at 5, and we add -16/7, or 5 minus 16/7. Well, that's a little harder because it's not a common denominator. So that's like 5/1. I'm gonna get a 7 on bottom. That's gonna be 35/7 minus 16/7. That is 19/7, and that is my y-coordinate. So the final answer, x, comma, y. That's my best 4 ever. -4, 19/7. Oh boy, that's tough work. If you understood that, you are in great shape right now. Keep trying your best. Let's go, crew.